I want you to imagine sitting in a coffee shop every single Saturday for almost 2 years, watching the same man walk through the door, take the same corner table by the window, order the same black coffee and blueberry muffin, and then just sit there. Not reading, not on his phone, not waiting for a meeting to start. Just sitting there, looking at the door, every single Saturday. And then one day, that man was me. Except I was the one watching him, and when I finally got up and walked over and asked him who he was waiting for, what he told me changed my entire life. I know that sounds like the kind of thing people say to get you to keep watching. But I promise you, by the end of this story you are going to understand exactly why I mean every single word of that. So stay with me. Was I wrong to get involved? Was it my place? Tell me in the comments what you would have done, because I genuinely go back and forth on this, even now. My name is Marcus, and at the time this story begins, I had just taken over as CEO of a mid-sized logistics company in Portland, Oregon. We weren't a giant corporation, but we weren't small either. About 300 employees, solid revenue, the kind of company that runs quietly and efficiently in the background, while bigger brands get all the headlines. I had worked my way up over 12 years, and when the founder, a woman named Patricia, decided to retire, she handed me the keys and told me not to break anything. I laughed. She did not laugh back. So no pressure, right? But I was driven, I was focused, and I was honestly a little consumed by the job in those early months. The kind of consumed where you forget to eat lunch, where you look up from your desk and realize the building is empty, and it is somehow 9 o'clock at night. My wife, Elena, used to say that I had 2 modes, work mode and sleep mode, and that she missed the third one, the one that was actually a husband and a person. She wasn't wrong. But she was patient, because she understood what this opportunity meant. We had been married for 9 years at that point, and we had a daughter named Sophia who was 7. And they were everything to me, even when my calendar didn't reflect that. And one of the things Elena and I had agreed on, one of the small, sacred commitments we made to ourselves when things got crazy, was that Saturday mornings were off limits. No emails, no calls, no thinking about inventory routing or quarterly projections. Saturday mornings, we would take Sophia to the farmer's market, and then Elena and Sophia would go do whatever adventure they had planned for the day, and I would walk 3 blocks to a coffee shop called Blue Heron, and sit with my coffee and my journal, and just breathe for a couple of hours. It was my reset. It kept me sane. Blue Heron was one of those places that feels like it was specifically designed for the kind of peace you can't manufacture. Dark wood, low light, mismatched chairs, the smell of really good espresso and something baking in the back. The baristas knew everyone by name. There was a chalkboard wall near the back where people wrote little messages and drawings, and nobody ever fully erased it. So it became this layered collage of 100 different moments. I loved that place. I still do. The first time I noticed him was on my 3rd or 4th Saturday there. He was already seated when I arrived. The corner table by the window, the one that looked out onto the street and caught the morning light just right. He was a man who I guessed was somewhere in his mid-50s, with gray hair cut short and the kind of quiet, still posture that makes you think either this person is incredibly at peace or incredibly sad. He had a black coffee, and what I later learned was always a blueberry muffin, and he was just looking at the door. Not in an anxious way, not checking his watch or pulling out his phone. Just looking, like he was expecting someone, like someone was about to walk through that door, and his entire morning would shift into something wonderful. I didn't think too much about it that first day. People wait for people, that's life. But the next Saturday, there he was again, same table, same coffee, same muffin, same posture, same quiet gaze at the door, and then the Saturday after that, and the one after that. I started to pay attention in the way you do when something tugs at you without quite explaining itself. I watched him enough to notice that he always arrived at exactly 8:45, that he always stayed until around 11, that he always paid in cash and left a generous tip, and that he always left alone. By about the 3rd month of this, I had made up entire stories about him in my head. He was waiting for a friend who was always late, and he was just too loyal to say anything. He was a writer, and the door watching was research. He was someone who had lost someone, and this was his way of staying close to a memory. I ran through dozens of possibilities, and none of them felt exactly right. And the honest truth is that none of my business. And I kept telling myself that, week after week. But then something happened that shifted everything. It was a Saturday in November, cold and rainy, the kind of Portland morning where the whole city feels like it's wrapped in a gray wool blanket. I came in later than usual, and the shop was packed. He was at his corner table, coffee and muffin already in front of him, and this time there was a small item on the table beside the muffin that I hadn't seen before. It was a drawing, a child's drawing, the kind done in crayon on white paper, of what looked like two people standing in front of a yellow house, with a big orange sun in the corner. I only got a glimpse of it because I walked past to get to a table near the back, but I saw it clearly enough. He had that drawing propped up against his coffee cup, like it was the most important thing in the room. And he was looking at it, not at the door, and his face was doing something I didn't have a word for. It wasn't grief exactly, it wasn't joy exactly, it was somewhere in between, like looking at something so precious and so painful at the same time that your face can't decide which direction to fall. I sat down and I opened my journal, and I wrote absolutely nothing for 45 minutes because I could not stop thinking about that drawing. And that brings me to the moment that changed everything. The moment that I keep coming back to when I ask myself whether I overstepped, whether it was my place, whether a stranger had any right to do what I did next. And I want you to sit with that question too, because I genuinely don't know if I would answer it the same way every time. So before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause right now and drop a comment below. What would you have done? Would you have walked over? Would you have minded your own business and let the man have his Saturday in peace? Because the arguments on both sides are real, and I thought about them for weeks before I finally made my choice. Tell me where you land on that, and then keep watching, because the rest of this story is the part that I almost didn't survive telling. It was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. The coffee shop was quieter than usual, a lot of people out of town or recovering from family obligations. He was there at his table, but something was different. The drawing was there, same as before. The coffee was there, the muffin was there. But he wasn't looking at the door. He was just looking down at the table, and even from across the room, I could see that his shoulders were carrying something heavy. Not the weight of waiting anymore. Something heavier. Something that looked a lot like giving up. I sat with my coffee for 20 minutes telling myself not to do it, and then I got up, walked across the room, stopped at his table, and said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. I've seen you here a lot of Saturdays and I wanted to make sure you're okay." He looked up, and his eyes were the kindest eyes I had ever seen on a human being. Just completely, extraordinarily kind. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, "I'm all right, but thank you for asking." I almost walked away. I almost said okay, and went back to my table and let the moment dissolve. But something about his eyes made me stay. So I said, "Do you mind if I ask, who are you waiting for?" And he smiled. Not a happy smile. A smile that had been through a lot and come out the other side still standing, barely. He said, "My daughter." I said, "Is she running late?" And he said, quietly, "She's been running late for about 18 months. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just asked if I could sit down, and he said yes. And we sat there for the next 2 hours, and he told me everything. His name was Robert. He was 58 years old. He had been a high school history teacher for 26 years, and he was the single father of a 22-year-old daughter named Lily. Lily's mother had left when Lily was 3. Not dramatically, not with a big fight, but quietly and thoroughly, the way some people leave, like water evaporating. Robert had raised Lily entirely on his own, and by his account, they had been the best of friends. The kind of parent-child relationship that people see from the outside and sort of can't believe is real. Movie nights and road trips and cooking together on Sunday mornings, and the kind of easy, honest conversations that some families spend whole therapy sessions trying to manufacture. But when Lily was in her junior year of college, she had gotten into a serious relationship with a man named Derek who, Robert said very carefully and without drama, did not like him. Robert never said anything bad about Derek. He was careful to say that he didn't know the whole story, that maybe he had done something to contribute to the distance. That relationships were complicated. But the short version was that over the course of about a year, Lily had drifted further and further away. The calls got shorter and less frequent. The holidays became complicated. And then one day, after a disagreement at a family dinner that Robert described as not even that significant, Lily had stopped calling altogether. That was 18 months ago. He still texted her on her birthday. He still texted on holidays. She occasionally replied with something brief and neutral, like someone managing a situation rather than talking to her father. He had written her a letter, a long, careful letter, taking responsibility for anything he might have done wrong, and asking for the chance to talk. She had not responded to the letter, but she knew he came to Blue Heron every Saturday. She had grown up coming here with him. This was their place, their Saturday ritual, long before it was mine. And he had told her in one of his texts that he would be there every Saturday, at their table, with coffee and a blueberry muffin, in case she ever wanted to come by. No pressure, no expectations, he would just be there. The drawing on the table was one she had made him when she was 6 years old. He brought it every week, so that when she walked in, if she walked in, she would see it, and know that he had held onto everything. I sat across from this man and I listened to all of this, and I felt something crack open inside me that I hadn't known was sealed shut. I thought about my own daughter, Sophia, 7 years old, with her crayon drawings and her specific laugh, and the way she called out for me when she woke up from a bad dream. I thought about what it would mean to lose that. To sit in a coffee shop every Saturday, holding a crayon drawing and just hoping. I told Robert about myself, about my job, about Sophia, about Elena. He asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully, the way people do when they have spent a lot of time learning how to be present with others. Before I left that day, I asked if I could come back next Saturday and sit with him again. He looked genuinely surprised, like the idea that someone would choose to come back hadn't really entered his calculations. He said he would like that very much. And I did come back. Every Saturday for the next 3 months, I sat with Robert at that corner table. We talked about history. He knew an extraordinary amount about history, and about fatherhood, and about the particular loneliness of loving someone who has put distance between you. I told my wife about him that first night, and she cried a little and told me to keep showing up. So I did. In January, through a combination of things I am still not entirely sure I should have done, I found Lily's email address. Robert had mentioned the name of the company where she worked, and it was not difficult from there. I sat for 3 days in front of a blank email, going back and forth about whether this was the most important thing I would ever do or the most invasive. I thought about what Robert had said, that he didn't want to pressure her, that he respected her choices even when they were breaking him. And I thought about that drawing, propped up against a coffee cup every Saturday for 18 months. I wrote Lily a simple email. I told her I was not family, not a mutual friend, just someone who had gotten to know her father over the last several months. I told her what I had seen, not to guilt her, not to lecture her, but because I thought she deserved to know. I told her about the drawing. I told her that I was a father too, and that I didn't know what had happened between them. And it was not my place to have an opinion about it, but that I did think she should know that he showed up every single week. I gave her my phone number in case she had questions, and I told her the rest was entirely up to her. Then I waited. And I didn't tell Robert what I had done. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday in March, I was sitting with Robert at our table, and the door of Blue Heron opened, and a young woman walked in. She had dark curly hair and Robert's same extraordinary eyes. She stood in the doorway for just a moment, and then she saw him, and her face did the same thing his face had been doing for 18 months. That expression that lives exactly between grief and joy. That expression that means I love you, and I'm sorry, and I don't know how we got here, but I am here now. Robert saw her, and the thing that happened in his face in that moment is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Every wall he had built to survive the waiting, every careful layer of patience and quiet hope, it all just dissolved instantly, completely, like it had never existed. He stood up from the table and she crossed the room, and they held on to each other for a long time, while everyone in Blue Heron pretended not to notice, and also completely noticed. I got my things together quietly. As I was leaving, Lily caught my eye over her father's shoulder, and she mouthed "thank you," and I nodded and walked out into the March morning and sat on a bench outside, and cried in the way you cry when something that has been wrong for a long time finally goes right. I learned later, through Robert, that Lily had been carrying her own weight of guilt and confusion for months, that the relationship with Derek had ended, that she had wanted to reach out, but didn't know how, that my email had given her the opening she needed to take a step she had been too afraid to take on her own. Robert and I still have coffee some Saturdays. He and Lily are rebuilding, slowly and carefully, the way real things get rebuilt. She came back to Blue Heron with him twice more that spring. The last time I saw them together, she had brought him a new drawing. Her own, done as an adult, a little self-conscious and imperfect and completely wonderful. Of the same two people, standing in front of the same yellow house, with the same big orange sun in the corner. He put it on the table right next to the old one. What I took from all of this is something I think about almost every day. Not every story that looks like giving up actually is. Some people are just waiting with everything they have, in the only way they know how, holding on to the last thing they were given by the person they love. And, sometimes the smallest act, sitting down, asking a question, writing a letter, showing up on a Saturday, is the thing that changes the entire direction of a life. I am not saying I did everything perfectly. I am not saying getting involved in someone else's family is always the right call. But I am saying that sometimes the most human thing you can do is walk across a room and ask someone if they're okay. If this story moved you even a little bit, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and I put everything I have into every single one of them. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one, because I have more stories like this and I promise they will stay with you. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Did I have any right to email Lily? Was it my place? Tell me honestly. I want to know where you stand. I'll see you all in the next story.